introduced. So I work at the Institute for Science and Ethics at the University of Bonn. I am a PhD student there, and I'm also a research associate, meaning I also work at the institute. I used to do, or I also went to the University of Bonn and did my my master's there. I have a master's in philosophy. So this is also where I'm coming from. I'm working on a sustainability perspective on AI and AI ethics from this philosophical point of view. And in my project, I'm looking at, or I'm asking what a sustainability perspective brings to AI ethics. So how does it conceptually change how we talk about AI ethics? And that's the big idea of the project, but this talk is all about it, so I don't want to give away too much at the very beginning. What I'm trying to do today is, now my slides don't work anymore, and I don't know why. Do they change for you? They don't, do they?
No,
they didn't change.
There we go.
All right.
Sorry about that. Okay, so what am I going to do today? First, I want to give you a sort of point of departure of where I'm coming from and what I've already done. And this is also going to be the biggest part of the talk today. This is based on a paper that me and my colleagues did last year, that we published last year, where I sort of set up, or where we set up the project and where we argue for why a sustainability perspective is important or interesting to AI ethics. Then after I've introduced that, I want to talk about the current state of sustainable AI as a field. But this part is going to be rather brief, also because the field is really young. And then finally, I want to get to where to go from here. So I want to present what I call a revisionary approach to sustainable AI, which is what I'm trying to do in my PhD project. And this is supposed to give you an outlook of where you could take the lessons that we've learned from the point of departure that I'm going to present. Okay. So first of all, point of departure, where are we starting from? I want to talk about AI ethics guidelines. And you probably heard about AI ethics guidelines before. I know Nicholas is working on them quite intensively. But just to give you the background on it, AI ethics guidelines are these guidelines that are put forth by industry, by governments, by certain task groups. This is just a collection of different AI ethics guideline documents that have been put out. We have the EU here with their high-level expert group on trustworthy AI. We have the Toronto Declaration. We have the Rome Call for AI Ethics that has been done in cooperation with the Vatican. UNESCO is working on it, but also companies like Microsoft are working on it. And these are all documents that purport a certain approach to AI ethics and that propose a way of tackling all the ethical challenges that we see with AI ethics. Interestingly enough, there's quite a few out there. I think Algorithm Watch, which is a nonprofit, German nonprofit, currently lists about 167, if I'm not mistaken. So there's plenty out there. But a common approach emerges right now. So how people talk about AI ethics in these public spaces tends to converge to one point, which is why I just want to show you an example to give you an overview of how this works and how AI ethics is done in this public sphere. And before I do that, actually, I have to give a little disclaimer. This is how AI ethics is done in these AI ethics guideline documents, but there's more to AI ethics. This is not the only way of doing AI ethics, and there's plenty of academic literature on it as well. And I will get to talk about that later. But for now, I want to focus on this. So this would be an example of one of these AI ethics guideline documents. I mean, this is obviously not the entire document, but this is how it's structured. This is the Rome Call for AI ethics. I just picked it because it has a nice website and it's a nice visual, but you could pick any of the others and they would be roughly the same in that they share certain properties. So usually what these AI ethics guidelines do is that they propose a set of rather high-level principles that are then defined more or less closely in the document of usually, I don't know, so sometimes 30 pages, sometimes up to 200, but in that range. And they will do that by by proposing these disconnected principles as well, and I'll just walk you through them so you get an idea of what's included and what's how people talk about AI in these AI ethics guideline principle documents. So you will get principles like transparency, and then the idea is AI systems must be understandable to all. So if you want to apply this principle, you would have to look at your current AI algorithm that you're developing or perhaps currently using. And then you want to check for whether it's understandable. And if it's not understandable to all, then you have to do something about it. You have to tweak it. You might have to redesign it. It depends on what the actual problem is. You already see this is quite vague. Obviously, this is just the slogan. They have more to say about transparency, but this is the idea. Same with inclusion, accountability. Impartiality is something you've probably heard about a lot. It's about bias and fairness. So AI algorithms should not discriminate in their outcomes. Rather, we should be careful that we don't find implicit biases in the outputs that the AI system gives. So we don't want them, for example, to, well, there's this one problem that you have with these image generating AI systems, where sometimes you put in, for example, Asian girls and it will give you over-sexualized pictures. Why is that? Because the training data was biased, and Asian girls are usually over-sexualized in these, and then you get this outcome, and we don't want that, and so on and so on. So this is the idea. This is just to show you how this works and how AI ethics is done. But there are plenty of problems with this, problems that have been identified in AI ethics literature. So these are problems that me and my colleagues have identified within the literature. It's not that we have found them and figured them out. These are things that are talked about. And I want to talk about all of these, but I want to pay special attention to the hidden costs problem. Now let me briefly walk you through what these mean. So first of all, the problem of ethics as hindrance has been pointed out. So usually you have these AI ethics guideline documents, and you as a developer, for example, are supposed to work with them. And then oftentimes you get the feedback from developers and engineers that, well, this is just another demand that is put on them, right? They're supposed to solve this problem. They're supposed to design this algorithm. And then on top of that, you get these principles. They're really hard to work with. They don't even know what they mean. They don't get any guidance. They are too high level. And in the end, it's just another problem to solve. Then on the other side, the need for interpretation. This is tied to the ethics as hindrance problem, right? These principles are very high level. They are not really designed, or they're not really formulated in a way that has the way that developers and engineers work in mind. So whenever you want to apply them, you as the engineer, you will have to figure out what they actually mean. That means you do a lot of the work, right? You have to interpret them. In the end, you're doing the ethics, and this is not what you're trained to do. So there seems to be a problem. And then finally, and as I said, I want to focus on this. There's the so-called hidden cost problem that many people in the literature have pointed out, especially people who work on sustainable AI have pointed out, that there's lots of regard for these problems that can be solved within one algorithm, right? So the algorithm is biased. We want to make sure it is not. So we take a look at the outputs of the system, and we try to tweak it, and we try to solve it. But then there's all these other costs, all these ethical problems that are attached to the AI that are not directly located within the system. So this could be, for example, broader changes to the labor market, right? If we introduce AI as a technology into our labor market, and it will take over certain tasks, that will change how people work. And there's many ethical issues attached to that. But usually these AI ethics guideline documents don't really address these. And the same is true for environmental problems, sustainability problems. So you might figure out, you might have heard already, and if you listen to Sophia's talks, I guess you know already quite a lot about this. But there's the problem of energy consumption. There's the problem of electronic waste. There's the problem of water usage in cooling server farms, for example. There's a problem of mining. So these are all associated with the procurement chain or the life cycle of AI systems. And these problems are not addressed within AI ethics guideline documents at all. So, and now focusing on this, what's where do these problems come from? Why do they arise? Why do AI ethics guideline documents fail to address these issues, who seem to be just as important as issues like bias, for example? And here I'm, on this slide at least, I'm referring to work by Thilo Hagendorf, who says, well, the root cause of all these problems seems to be that we tend to perceive AI as isolated artifacts, right? When we do ethics, when we apply our AI ethics guidelines or our AI ethics principles, we apply them to a particular algorithm. So this algorithm is biased, and we want to make sure it's not biased. Therefore, we have to do something about the algorithm. And because we focus in on this very particular thing, we can't really assess all that is going on around it. We can't really assess the context in which this AI system is operating. So this is where the blind spot is coming from, is what Hagendorf argues in this 2020 paper. Now, what my colleagues and I did in our 2020 paper, and I'm here drawing heavily on work by my colleague Thijs van der Meulenbrücke and others, we argued that this viewing of AI algorithms or AI as a technology as isolated artifacts is connected to what we called an ethics of carefulness. And I want to define that for you and then talk about it a little bit, because this is what we have added to the discussion. So the idea of an ethics of carefulness is that it's characterized by this motivation to make a technology design careful and safe, therefore the name, an ethics of carefulness. But that already presupposes certain things, and in particular that presupposes what we call the technological paradigm. And that is the idea that an ethics of carefulness always works within the logic of current technologies. What that means is that it is just presupposed what a technology is, what purpose it is supposed to serve in a society, and then also what kinds of problems it is supposed to solve, right? So we always depart from a technology that is already existing. It works in a certain way. We just assume it cannot work in another way. And we also assume that it will just do certain things, like it's just very suited to, for example, with AI systems. Well, it's just how they work. They will analyze large amounts of data, and we can apply that to certain things and to various different contexts, and this will just happen. There's no way to change it. So now better make sure that we have this technology, so we better make it safe. That's the idea. And because it's always already working within this technological paradigm, this is also an ethics of individuals, which is where we get back to the idea of the isolated artifacts, right? So we have the technology, it just is a certain way, and it has a certain role in society that it will take up inevitably. Therefore, we need to look into the technology and make sure we tweak it a little bit, make it a little safer, just round the edges a little bit. And this is then the role of engineers. So that's individual people who are supposed to perform this tweaking. So individual people, individual artifacts. And this is usually how this works. And this is also how we argue these AI ethics guideline documents work. We take the technology, we look at particular algorithms, and then we rely on individual people, geniuses, the inventors, which is why I put this little picture of this Disney character here. I don't know what his name is in English, actually, but you might have seen him, the inventor, the genius, right, who tweaks and just builds this, has these great ideas and builds this new machine. So this is all ties down then to an isolationist view, right? You always look at the very, very small scale individual level, and you put lots of work on AI developers' shoulders, actually. Now, this is I think, and this is the argument that I'm trying to make, where sustainable AI comes in. So why, in face of these problems, should we care about sustainable AI, and what can it actually bring to the discussion? We've heard that maybe this is not the right way to address the hidden costs problem, but how can we change that? How can a sustainability perspective actually be of any help? And here I want to just give a very brief definition of sustainability. It's very contestable. There's lots of literature on sustainability, and this will also be a big part of my project. But just to give you an overview of what, for example, the UN definition would be, there's this famous Brundtland report who talks about sustainability being, well, making sure that people in the present can meet their needs without compromising the ability of future people to also meet their needs, right? So we have this idea of there's human needs, they need to be met in the present, but they also need to be met in the future. How can we make sure that there's, you could call it a just distribution, right, of capabilities to meet your needs? And then usually this is discussed within this 3-pillar sustainability framework, where you have the environment, society, and economy. And all of these 3 parts, all of these 3 aspects, I would like to call them systems. You'll see later why, will have to work together to meet current and future human needs. That's the idea. There's plenty of criticism about this sustainability concept. I'll talk, maybe if I have time, a little bit more about that later. Maybe just 1 or 2 things now. For example, it's been criticized for being too anthropocentric. You'll see that normatively it's all about human needs, right? So what about animal needs? What about just ecosystem needs, and so on and so forth? And then also these 3 pillars have been criticized. Why is it these 3? Seems like environment and society might be more important to human needs than economy. Do we assume that there's only one way of doing economy? Do we have to maintain environment, maintain society how it is, and maintain economy how it is? Maybe not. It depends. So there's lots of discussion. I won't come to a conclusion in this talk, but yeah, this is the overview of sustainability and what it is and what discourse about sustainability is. Okay. Now coming back to AI and how sustainability relates to AI. And as I said, you've listened to Sophia's talk, so you've probably heard a lot about it. But just to show you again, there's plenty of sustainability problems related to economy, society, and environment that are related to AI, and specifically its procurement chain and its life cycle, like end of life. So we have, I just give you this overview of different impacts that you might have. We have mining here. Mining for precious minerals uses lots of fresh water, uses plenty of space. You need probably need to erode. It's probably not the right word, but get rid of forests. Then you have the huge energy consumption of data centers. They need to be running all the time. They also need to be cooled. How much water you actually need to cool them is not really properly assessed, as far as I believe. This, of course, energy consumption also leads to lots of carbon emissions. And then at the on the other side, we also have the problem with working conditions. So in order to run an algorithm or to develop it, you need plenty of what some people have called ghost labor, right? And you probably have heard of the Amazon Mechanical Turk, click workers who work for very low wages, usually in countries where the labor conditions are not as favorable as, for example, in Germany. And these people are usually what this could look like, for example, is people sitting at a computer waiting for a task. So it's task based. So people need to stay on their computer to check whether there's tasks all the time. Then they have to perform these mindless tasks of labeling data sets. And then that's how they earn a living, but they never really learn any new skills. It's very unsafe labor conditions, and so on and so forth. And then finally, at the very end of the life cycle of an AI system, you have the electronic waste and the health problems that are associated with that, but also, again, working conditions of people who try to get value out of that electronic waste, right? Like trying to get precious minerals out of the electronic waste. Here's a picture of Ghana. In Accra, this is a site where people burn electronic waste, which then produces all these toxic gases in order to make a living. Obviously also not the best labor conditions. So you see how how AI systems not necessarily you cannot necessarily pin it down to one singular AI system, but AI as a technology has big impacts on the environment, on society, and also on labor conditions. So this is, I think, good enough reason to care about sustainable AI. Now, what does it bring to the table? And well, what my colleagues and I argue is that what the sustainability brings is exactly this zooming out from the isolationist view and the zooming out from an individualistic approach, from an ethics of individuals and ethics of carefulness. What it really points us to these hidden costs. When we think about sustainability, we have to think about how AI is connected globally to certain processes of how we do how we labor, right? How we create value in economies. It's related to extractivist practices where we exploit the earth basically to get to the materials that we need in order to build AI systems, but also in general digital technologies. And it's if you look at these supply chains, you'll see that this is a very global endeavor. So sustainability really forces us sort of to look beyond singular AI algorithms, because you cannot really address them on the level of singular AI algorithms. So what a sustainability perspective therefore brings in is, or what it tells us is that because we take this focus of individual algorithms for granted, all these problems that I've just described seem very hidden, right? Because you cannot see them on the individual level. But once you just get rid of the individual level, and once you think about these big global impacts, sustainability impacts, you'll see that they're not very hidden at all. You just need to look, right? It's very obvious that what we're doing with the electronic waste is a problem. It's very obvious that labor conditions for click workers are a problem. It's very obvious that mining is a problem. It's once you take that perspective that they become uncovered, these costs, right? And therefore, my colleagues and I in this paper argued that the sustainability perspective actually points us towards what we have called an ethics of desirability. And I also want to define that for you. It's sort of the contrast to the ethics of carefulness, right? While the ethics of carefulness works within the technological paradigm, just assumes that technology is done in a certain way, and then it's already there, and we have to just tweak it and make it a little better, a little less harmful. And ethics of desirability actually scrutinizes the technological paradigm. That means it tries to scrutinize established chains of technological problems and solutions. It points us to different ways of designing technologies. And the main tenet here is that technological development is never really a process with a predetermined end, right? It's not that AI algorithms just work in this way and they are just applicable to these problems, therefore they will be used to solve these problems that we have. And ethics of desirability asks us to question whether the problems that we're trying to solve are actually problems, right? And whether there's other problems that we might need to solve and that we need different means to solve. So it's an ethical political choice to figure out the right development path of a technology, and that is AI as a technology, not AI as this AI and this AI and this AI. So it really zooms out to this broader, or this perspective on broader developments, not on how to develop this AI algorithm, but rather on how we do AI research and also how we want to design the worldwide adoption of the technology. So for example, maybe do we need rules on which AI algorithms are actually worthwhile to have and not worthwhile to have? Do we need ChatGPT? Do we need to regulate what AI can be used for? Is it especially given its environmental impact, right? Given our other goals, our other visions for what society is supposed to be like, what our environment is supposed to be like, what all these systems of sustainability, right? Economy, society, and the environment are supposed to look like, and how they work together. So an ethics of desirability then asks, what is the desirable development path that we want to take? And this is large scale. And then, of course, we argue, well, we need to figure out what the desirable development path is, and maybe sustainability can tell us what is desirable, right? Maybe we find something normative in the concept of sustainability that can help us out or help us figure out where we want to take this. So then the idea of an ethics of desirability for AI is then sort of what I've tried to show in this picture, right? We think of how AI interacts with all these systems that we see, the environment, the economy, society, maybe other systems, maybe systems on larger and not so large scales. It really depends. And then we figure out what this is supposed to look like. And then that's how we determine what we should do with AI, how we should do AI research, and how we should regulate AI and what uses which uses of AI are legitimate and which are not. And this, as I said, is not only an ethical choice, it's also a political choice. So this is the outlook. This is what we did in this first paper. I hope this was not too dense. And now I want to get into where we are now and what people are doing in the context of sustainable AI. I called it a quick literature review. It's a really quick literature review. But maybe just to get you or to show you where it all started. The term was coined by my PhD supervisor, Amy van Weinsberg, in this one paper. It's actually an opinion paper on sustainable AI, AI for sustainability, and the sustainability of AI. So making this distinction between using AI for good things, for sustainability purposes, versus looking at the sustainability of AI itself. And this includes this one slide that I showed you with all the different sustainability impacts that AI has. But also, Amy is not the first one to work on sustainable AI. She's just the one to really coin the term and put it on the map. Other people have worked on it a little bit before, and also many people now work on it right now. I want to give you a list of different related approaches. This is definitely not a complete list, absolutely not. But I just wanted to show you these different approaches, because I think all of them look at something that is relevant. So there's, for example, this neo-Heideggerian perspective that Lemmens, Bloch, and Zweer put out in actually already 2017, where they called for the terrestrial turn in the philosophy of technology. So this is not specifically about AI, this is about philosophy of tech and technology in general. And they argue that we have the problem that the technological logic has taken over the entire world, basically, and has been just used to its conclusion. So the idea that everything, and this is a Heideggerian perspective or idea, everything that is in the path of technology is perceived as standing reserve. That means, for example, natural resources are considered as something that can be used for and can be manipulated for technology, and this is how technology just operates. It sees something, it sees the world, and it turns it into standing reserve, something that can be used, something that can be utilized via technological means. And Lemmens, Bloch, and Zweer said in 2017, well, we need a new perspective. This logic of technology is about to undermine itself. We cannot keep extracting. This will just take away the means of actually doing technological progress, right? If we exhaust the earth and we all die, then there's no technology anymore anyways. So we need to look at technology in a different way. So that is all about changing our outlook or addressing the technological paradigm. Then there's plenty of empirical studies. I'm sure you're aware of many of these. So you have people who look at the emissions created by AI AI models, and also people who look at the entire life cycle. A very, very well-cited paper, not the most recent. I should update this slide actually. Strubel et al. In 2019 calculated the carbon emissions produced by an AI algorithm. Also Crawford did this Atlas of AI thing. Also disclaimer, I should probably say that she's been criticized a bit, so maybe I should also here update the reference a bit, but just to give you an overview, people working in this holistic way, so not studying particular algorithms, but rather studying the entire value chain of AI systems and AI technology on this larger scale is what's happening. Then we have people working on AI and the SDGs, that is the Sustainable Development Goals. People working within a policy framework, using the policy framework that exists, Sustainable Development Goals, and trying to apply it to AI and trying to assess AI through this policy framework. Very famous paper is Vinusa et al., I think, 2020, also Goralski and Tan, 2020. So here we have people taking a policy perspective. And then finally, there's a very recent book by Henrik Skog-Setra on technosolutionism, concluding that this entire idea of trying to use AI for sustainability is a technosolutionist idea, collecting different papers, trying to assess whether this is actually working or whether it's more detrimental, and then concluding actually that usually technosolutionists approaches, so that means, maybe I should explain, technosolutionism very generally means trying, just believing that you can solve any problem by just having more tech, right? New innovations will get us out of this mess. You observe it a lot in the context of the climate crisis, right? We need better cars, electric cars. We need this and that, and then all these technologies will save us. And then, of course, that also means we don't have to change anything about our lifestyle at all if the innovation is going to do that for us. And then Setra is concluding that actually most of the time technosolutionist approaches don't really address the root causes of the problem, just symptoms. Maybe that can work, probably not. Really depends. So why am I showing you all of these? I think all of them sort of tackle different aspects of the sustainability perspective and how we should change AI ethics in order to account for sustainability. So we have this idea of questioning the technological logic. We have this holistic view. We have policy that needs to be addressed in order to make big changes. And we have also approaches that question how we talk about technology and how we relate technology to our problems. As I said, not an exhaustive list, but all of these, I think, even though they don't use the term sustainable AI, relate to the idea of sustainable AI. So now finally, I hope I still have a little bit of time. I'll have like 7 minutes maybe. So I'll give you a quick outlook. This is where I'm trying to take it. So this is what I call a revisionary approach to sustainable AI. And I believe that in order to achieve an ethics that can actually tackle all of these problems and make sure that these hidden problems are not hidden anymore, lies in really reconceptualizing AI and how we think about AI as a technology. So I'm borrowing this idea of a revisionary approach or revisionary project from Sally Haslanger. My project is a conceptual one. I'm trying to redefine or just define what sustainable AI means. And Haslanger says, well, there's different ways of going about answering this question. We can approach it from a conceptual standpoint. We can just analyze how we usually use the concept of sustainable AI, right? Then we could go about it in a descriptive way. We could look at instances of sustainable AI, look what they're like, and then adjust our concept accordingly, right? Maybe a good example is, or a good way to understand what she means by this is understanding in which context she uses this distinction. So she introduces this in the context of gender and race, for example. So a conceptual approach would be, what do we usually mean by gender and race? And how do we talk about it? That would be conceptual. And we can analyze how we talk about gender and race. Same or different for the descriptive approach. We could look at different instances of gender and race, and then see, oh, it's not that easy. Our concepts don't really fit. Therefore, we revise our concept in the context of what we see actually, and then finally, and this is what I want to point to actually, is the revisionary project. That's where neither the instances matter so much, nor how we use the concept, but rather this is a very normative perspective, asking, given our legitimate purposes, and this is where the normativity comes in, right? We assume certain purposes are legitimate. How do we have to use the concept in order for it to serve our needs? So in the context of gender and race, for example, how should we talk about gender in order to serve our needs and in order to fulfill these legitimate purposes that we have? And I want to do the same for sustainable AI. And here we are a bit in the context or in the territory of critical theory. So the idea, and this is tied to the legitimate purposes idea. So usually critical theory is about analyzing social structures and power structures, right? And this is sort of a revisionary project is a preliminary to that. So you want to first just assume that certain purposes are legitimate, and then you want to analyze how certain concepts are used right now. So for example, how do we use sustainable AI? What do we understand under sustainable AI? And then you can criticize this use through the legitimate purposes that you assume, right? So you can analyze who is using sustainable AI in this way, and should we maybe use it in a different way if we want to serve other interests? That's the idea. So this is why we're in the territory of critical theory. So this is then, I believe, where sustainability comes in, right? Because so far I've just assumed that there's legitimate purposes, but the question is, what are our legitimate purposes? And I think in this context, we can ask, well, what are the demands that are entailed by sustainability discourse? What is really important? What needs are we trying to meet? And then how do we have to talk about sustainable AI? How can we conceptualize AI to serve our purposes, to serve our sustainability needs? And you've already seen that thinking about AI as this particular algorithm, like thinking of AI as an array or just a number of different singular isolated algorithms doesn't really work, because then our sustainability problems are hidden. We want to find a conceptualization of AI as a technology that makes it so that we can actually see these sustainability needs, these sustainability demands. And this is then what I'm trying to do in my PhD project. Now, I think because for the sake of time, I'll skip this slide. This is just to show you that sustainability discourse is terribly complicated. I've just given you this this very brief UN definition. There's much more to it. This is also a very old slide. I could add much more. Just so you see that even here on the normative grounding side, there's so many different things that could ground sustainability demands, right? And it's not quite clear which ones win out in the end. So it's not that easy. It's not like we just have sustainability demands and then we just have to align our concepts of AI according to that. But maybe there's something that we can use from sustainability discourse. And then this is my last slide, actually getting back to the technological paradigm. Again, I just want to reiterate that we have to conceive AI as embedded in all these different systems that relate to sustainability, like the environment, society, and the economy. How we cash that out, I don't really know yet. This is the project, and I would like to hear your thoughts. And yeah, I just want to thank you for listening to me for about 45 minutes. And I look forward to your comments and questions, and I'm just very happy to discuss and also explain. I think I rushed through it a little bit, maybe. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Larissa, for this beautiful, profound talk with so many provocations. So I myself will have lots of questions. I'll just ask you a general question as we wait for other colleagues and participants to raise questions. William has raised his hand. So my general, I will have several questions, but two major questions, William and Nicholas so far. So the first question is relating to one of your slides when you listed several 6 principles, right, for this an overall approach for the question of AI ethics. And I was thinking particularly of the third principle, accountability. I was just wondering, what would you make of this whole issue of moral responsibility when we are dealing with AI systems, especially thinking of self-driving vehicles and stuff like that? And in your presentation, of course, you dealt with the whole thing of isolated artifacts, the idea of individuals, and of course, many individuals that take part in the development, in the construction of an ethical, safe AI. However, when we come to legislation and juridical issues relating to the regulation of AI, we always bringing back this question: how are we gonna account for responsibility in terms of moral responsibility, especially when we think that depending on each country, we might have different ways of proceeding in terms of juridical responsibility. For instance, in Brazil, like I understand in Germany and many countries that use some kind of a Roman law system, we usually think of business and startups, companies as having some kind of juridical accountability status, like, saying that they are accountable for, wrongdoings or malpractice. But I was just wondering how, in your approach to AI ethics, you take care of this question of accountability without falling back into this kind of liberal presupposition that we are dealing with individuals and not necessarily collective or groups of people. My second question, of course, you don't have to give us in response, because this is a broader question relating to sustainability. Towards the end of your presentation, it seems that sustainability is now replacing whatever was taken to be metaphysics in the past, because sustainability is almost all comprehensive to the point of comprehending everything else, right? But when you mention, very interesting, this new Heideggerian approach, it's very important to make sure that we have a terrestrial approach to sustainability, right? We are thinking of human beings who dwell on Earth, etc. Just like Heidegger was talking about dwelling, right? And the whole thing of humans getting to know their place in the cosmos. So my question is, would you say that sustainability has some kind of a metaphysical role to play, or is it something that only philosophers would think of when they talk about sustainability? Thank you very much for your question. Now we have signed up James William and Nicholas, but you can just respond to my questions first. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that would be great. So concerning the first question about responsibility and how to solve it in current approaches, and also my approach. So usually what they mean, or what people, or I think in this principle, this accountability principle, was all about, well, there's a human in the loop, right? There's a human who's responsible, And that's the idea that this principle put forth. And of course, that's very, very difficult. You mentioned legal frameworks, right? So we had this big discussion actually about self-driving cars, where the question was, who's responsible when an accident happens? Is it the driver? Well, then that sort of defeats the point of self-driving cars, right? Is it the engineer? Who is it? And the conclusion actually was, I think at least in Europe, that these cars are now banned. They're not going to be the problem of responsibility could not be solved, so they are not going to be on the streets because they are considered high risk. I think in the EU we have this this framework of low risk, high risk. What was it? I hope I'm not saying anything wrong right now, but definitely these categories, 3 categories, different categories of risk. And then there's one category where it's so risky that we just won't do it at all. And I think self-driving cars fall into that. So this is one way of how legislators tried to address this problem of accountability, responsibility. How would I, in my approach, well, how would I tackle this? Of course, responsibility is always a problem of individuals, right? Who in the end is accountable? But I think what my approach brings in, or it's not my approach, it's not only my approach, also what the approach of others brings in, is that you are able to make this assessment, precisely the assessment that the EU did of saying, actually, this is so risky, the responsibility is so fuzzy, we can't really tell who's responsible here. And because it's so high stake, we just don't do it. So this is sort of looking at how we want societies to be run, and then deciding, is this AI solution actually worth putting in place, given all its risks and all its problems with responsibility. So this already is the EU legislation, you could say, is already sort of this approach put into practice, looking at looking at the state of society and what we think responsibility should be. And this is nothing that can be solved within the algorithm, right? We can't make the algorithm. Well, in some cases we can, maybe. In some cases we can say it makes sense that in the end a human is responsible because the human is in the loop. The human makes the decision in the end. But we only want that for some low-stake scenarios. We don't want that for example, also the self-driving cars, but also legal processes like a judge shouldn't use a recommender system, probably. I think that's also something that's banned by the EU. We don't want it used in assessing immigration documents, visas, for example. Canada right now uses AI in assessing, and not entirely assessing. It's still people who approve or disapprove, but in pre-classing applications, visa applications, and of course there's bias and so on. And maybe we don't want that. And this is how I would say we deal with it from this. We deal with the problem outside of the AI algorithm, and that's already this approach put into place, if that makes sense. I hope that was a little rambly there. And then the second question about sustainability being this all-encompassing thing and basically being a metaphysical concept, yes, I actually agree. I think this is also something that we should harshly criticize sustainability discourse for, because anything can be sustainability, right? If it's all about human needs and it's about the environment, the society, and the economy, then what doesn't fall under the label sustainability? So I think we need to make very sure that we're clear on what we mean and what goals we actually look towards when we're talking about sustainability. And this will be part of my project, actually. So I don't really have an answer for that yet, but I think there should be one. And I agree, it's currently being a placeholder for all these hopes and dreams that we attached to the ideal world where everything is great, and we have these technological utopias, or maybe we have dystopias where we say, well, sustainability will never be achieved. And yeah, it's very much a metaphysical thing. I think though that most philosophers actually stay clear of the term. Like, for example, Lemons Block Zweer, they spoke about the terrestrial turn specifically because they wanted to avoid this I don't know their motivations. I assume they want to avoid this all-encompassing sustainability label that's also often misused nowadays. So yeah, but I see the connection there. Thank you for pointing it out.
Thank you, Larissa. Now we have William, Nicholas, and Aline. Please, William, you go first.
So, thank you, Larissa, for your presentation. I'll have just, I would have several questions, but I'll have just one question. Because you laid out a systematic approach, and something that we were discussing in our colloquium, at least in one of the last panels, was the approach of several approaches go through AI as a sort of an impartial or neutral aspect, like it's doing its purpose, and we should maybe arrange around it to make it safer when it's sort of AI technologies are not different from all the several previous technologies where they're made by us through a certain prism. So is it just analytical, your view of systems, or do you really think that we can sever the AI aspect from the capitalist mode of life, or are those just intricate? And because when you're talking about the ethics of desirability, you maybe touch it a little bit on the way that we could change a culture of building AI. So I saw that you went a little bit over there, but you went back to the systems part. So are you considering these parts systematically apart, or just analytically apart?
I don't think, well, actually, I think they are absolutely related and intertwined. So the idea that we have to take the systems approach is born from the rejection of AI as this impartial and neutral technology, right? So maybe I can refer here to some work by Andrew Feenberg, who says that every design choice is already political, right? It's serving someone's purpose. Technology is built with certain interests and certain ideas of what the problem is in mind. And if we want to address that, we have to take into consideration in what context the technology is built, right? So only if we take the context into account can we see how political it actually is. So both of these relate. You have the technology doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it can never be neutral. But we can also leverage that by saying, wait, look, the technology right now is serving this purpose. Maybe it should serve a different purpose. Maybe it should be designed in a different way. And this realization that it's always political, it's always intertwined. It's always intertwined with all of these systems, right? If it wasn't for the environment, there would be no AI, because there's no minerals that we could use, no hardware, right? And there's no dumping grounds for the electronic waste later. If it wasn't for the society and how it is run right now, if it wasn't for the economic models that exist, there would be no AI. So how do these relate, and how do we solve problems? Are these problems that need to be addressed in the design of the technology? Sometimes, but maybe we should address problems also on the different levels. And you just need this entire holistic view. And I think this is what you get once you reject this idea of the impartial, the neutral technology. Does that answer the question? Yeah, okay. And again, Andrew Feenberg is someone whose work I refer to here. So that could be interesting.
Thank you, Larissa. Nicholas.
Thank you for your talk, Larissa. I would like to make you a question. Actually, many questions, but I'm going to do one now. If I have time, I'll do the other. It's like on your work, like I know that you are like a born and bred philosopher, like your whole background is in philosophy. And like during your talk, this is the first time that I got to like really listen for you talking about your research in 45 minutes. Like when you talk about the ethics of carefulness, and in the end, you brought critical theory. And I was like, oh, from where in philosophy does she base all of her research and her ideas? Because during the whole research, your whole exposition, I was like, okay, she's gonna mention someone, she's gonna mention something, and then I'm gonna understand like where is all of this coming from? And then in the end, you got critical theory, like, okay, then it's based on this. But I would like to know, like, if like you're basing yourself on critical theory and like Frankfurt School and all of that, what are the philosophers, or like maybe not just critical theory, like what is like your source of inspiration, and like where do you draw in philosophy, and not just like because you do some kind of like empirical research, like you're looking at the field, seeing at the problems, like gathering some data, trying to do a work of descriptive ethics. But then when you come with the normativity and you want to make a criticism, and then like where do you draw on your bag of philosophers to base your work? So like, is just critical theory? Do you have specific authors? Do you have a specific school? Is there something outside of the critical theory? Like, what does a philosopher use to base his sustainable AI analysis? That is my question to you now.
It's a very complicated question, actually, because it's still sort of evolving. But yes, I at least I have decided that I will work from this critical theory perspective. And yes, I'm thinking about Frankfurt School stuff, but actually, who I've been referencing here was Sally Haslinger, who has, as I said, worked in the context of gender and race. And I think you can, she basically mapped out this approach to defining different concepts. And I think what I found very interesting about her approach is that you can start with the legitimate purposes. So you already have, in defining the concepts, you depart from somewhere normative and you make it very explicit. Because usually when you define concepts, or what the problem would be here, or what the project was supposed to be like, was trying to define sustainability and trying to order and just categorize all these different approaches to sustainability. And there's so many out there, and then you get to the problem that many of them are not very desirable and very problematic. But if you just do this very neutral concept definition thing, then you can't really distinguish between them. So this idea to realize that this is all very political anyways, and that we have to account for that, and that we have to analyze whose perspective we're taking on board, and whose perspective and interests and interests basically we want to further. This is what I found really interesting, and this is why I refer to Sally Haslinger. But then I don't only refer to her and all this classical critical theory stuff. I also am very indebted to just philosophy of technology that opposes the empirical turn. So in a way, what I'm doing right now is just reacting to approaches that I think are unfavorable and do not serve what I want to do. So there's this idea of the empirical turn in the philosophy of technology, which tries to look at individual technologies, get very concrete, and try to do an ethics of, it's always an ethics of AI, perhaps even an ethics of recommender systems, and ethics of this and ethics of that, and ethics of autonomous cars. And this is all motivated by the realization, or perhaps just the tenet of many philosophers, to say that it's not a good idea to talk about technology with a capital T. What Heidegger did, for example, right? Just act like technology is just this big thing, this big phenomenon. It all works the same, and then we lose something, right? We lose all these intricacies. But I think, on the other hand, now with the empirical turn, we also lose something. If you just look into very individual technologies, so it's always technology with a capital T, and technologies, particular technologies, then we also lose something. We lose this perspective. We lose the idea that there's something to technology, and something something to the way that we talk about technology, and how we use technology, and how we integrate into our societies. And this is why I was also very inspired by Andrew Feenberg, who I've just mentioned actually in the question before, who says, no, technology is political. And he's working from the science and technology studies background, STS. And this is something that I'm trying to get into. So it's basically I looked at the philosophy of technology, and I saw the problem with technology with the big T, but I also see the problem with this new empirical turn approach, and there must be something else. And I think it needs to be political. I think all these questions are very political, and that's why I think critical theory is a good point to start, like a good point of departure. That makes sense. This is how I got there. But the project is ongoing, and I'm sure that I'll read much more and find other approaches that I find fruitful in this field. Yeah, exactly. Marcuse, for example. Actually, Andrew Feenberg has this this new book, The Ruthless Critique of Everything Existing, where he grapples with the work of his, I think he was a supervisor, wasn't he? Herbert Marcuse.
Yes.
Yeah. Which
Thank
I think
you very
is really
much, Larissa. We have now Aline for her question. Go ahead, Aline.
Hello, good morning or
Morning.
afternoon there. So I have a question, but I think you already answered, but I'm gonna make it anyway, because I make a big question. I'm learning how to make big questions in philosophy. So the problem of sustainable AI wouldn't be at the core, and since you pointed out human needs as a way to make AI sustainable, not just an issue of innovation and unpredictability, but instead a problem of governance, meaning that we are changing the rules of power from nation states. And we have, actually, we deal in this way with territoriality, which we don't have anymore because we're doing everything online. So we can reach every side of the world. To a digital governance that impacts and decides our daily lives. And here, I would like to explain the meaning of nation state, right? I was reading Bauman, and he said that a nation is a nation exercising full and undivided state sovereignty over claimed territory, and a state signaling the unity of nations' interests as justification for its demands for discipline. So I have a nation, I have people living in this territory, and they are decided for these people, but now I don't have that, right? So I'm changing the rules of power as I'm dealing with innovation. And since our humans who invent, develop, apply worldwide the applications and impact people's lives, wouldn't this be a societal problem? And shouldn't we focus on who is getting the authority to structure this? New governance, the agents who are deciding this, and how they are making these decisions?
Right. So I think what you're touching on is sort of a, well, it is a political problem that we have to grapple with, right? Because who has the authority to actually do something about it? And I mean, we see the problems everywhere with, we've had a talk at our conference recently about post-colonialism and how it's not nation states who exploit countries anymore, but we have a colonial system in place where companies come in and they find structures that are favorable to them, that are left over from colonial structures, right? And we have all these companies working internationally, exerting power. And the question is, how can we address that? Well, I don't know whether I can answer that. I think the EU is taking steps. I've seen that the African Union is also, I think, taking steps to find overarching regulation. I've seen Brazil has been working on AI regulation for a bit. In the end, it's all about how can we regulate AI as a technology, and I believe this can only be achieved by regulating AI companies. How do you do that? Well, big question. As a philosopher, I can't really answer, and I'm already out of my waters here. I think you probably have to regulate companies, but maybe there's other things that you need to regulate. Maybe you need to regulate just what sort of products can be sold. I guess that's indirectly also regulating companies, but yeah, I find that really hard. And if I have to be honest, I'm very happy that I'm just the philosopher who doesn't have to answer that question. I'm just calling for a more comprehensive, large-scale approach, and then someone else needs to put it into practice.
Thank you, Larissa. Nicholas, please go ahead.
I told you I had more questions, and then you gave me the opportunity. I want to make you a question about like your remark on techno-solutionism. Like, I want to try to push back to like to do some discussion on the term as someone who is on the side of like the technique. Like, I on the conference that you guys wonderfully organized, which was really good. Thank you for the conference.
Oh, thank you.
There was a lot of talk about like this convergent idea that like we're not going to solve none of these problems only with technical solutions, which I agree. And I agree with Fenberg that like every implementational choice in the design of a technology has political motivations or normative motivations or something like this. I agree with all of that a lot. But I've said, I don't know if you feel this, maybe I feel, because I'm a representative of this other side, I feel a lot of like sometimes bitterness or like strong criticism against like the people who do the technical side of the research. Like for example, like you have a lot of engineers working with like questions like how can we make our systems more efficient or more sustainable, or people working on other areas of AI ethics. And these people are like giving like, you're a philosopher, you have your tools in your crafts to attack the problem. Engineers, they have their own tools and like they have their own little bag of knowledge. Like, I can try to change the world by building things because that's what I learned how to do. But when you like, I see a lot of the discourse on AI ethics, especially on the sustainable side of AI ethics, is like this hard criticism against the technical side. Like, I even saw some talks like, but they don't know what they're doing and they don't know what ethics is. And I know a lot of engineers who study ethics, but I don't see this kind of criticism on the other side of the debate. I never participated on a technical conference where I saw an engineer bashing philosophers. They don't do that. This is not a thing that is done. And if someone did that, it would be reprehended. Like the best AI engineers and like the top people from my field, they dabble with philosophy. Some do a little bit better than others because some of them have more training, but they admire philosophy. Like they really think is an interesting and worth studying field. So they dedicate themselves to this. But I don't see the same sign on the other side. And like we see this whole idea of like, I know what is the argument behind techno-solutionism, and I agree with it, but I also see an extreme viewpoint of this thing like that simply like puts any kind of technical research, like, no, this is not important because they're not going to solve it because we actually need a revolution to fix everything, which I agree. I would be the first one to grab a pitchfork and run with you if you scream revolution now. But I would like to see if you also feel this tension between like the technical part and the humane parts of the debate, that they are actually like pulling each other apart when maybe they should be working more together. What are your thoughts on these?
I think, well, first of all, I agree that sometimes I also feel that animosity, which I believe shouldn't be there. But I think the techno-solution critique is actually not really about criticizing engineers who are actually trying to solve things, or at least it shouldn't be about that. It's more about broader societal, I'm trying to say broad less often because Sophia told me I use it a lot, societal the societal narrative that don't worry, the engineers are they're gonna save us all, just count on them. So I think actually what we should be doing in employing this techno-solutionism critique is putting responsibility off engineers' shoulders, right? It should be something about encouraging engineers to do whatever they can, but also sort of managing expectations and making sure that we don't over-rely on engineers to solve all of humanity's problems, even though they design algorithms, and that's as far as their work goes. Not saying that they're not philosophically interested, and I've talked actually to many engineers who are very well read, and I was quite impressed because I'm only well read in philosophy. I'm not. I can't talk about engineering at all. But yeah, to reiterate, I agree. I feel that animosity. I think it's the problem is that there's this reactionary attitude because you are basically slapped with these techno-solutionism narratives in the face by policymakers all the time, not by engineers. So it's this idea of, well, but we have to do something, and therefore people tend to push back hard, and then sometimes it hits the wrong people. But actually, this should be something that I think philosophers and people in the humanities and engineers can agree on, that there's limits to what engineers can do, and that if we recognize these limits, then they can do plenty of good. That makes sense? That would be my perspective on it.
Makes total sense. I really appreciate your answer, and I completely aligned with what you think. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larissa. James William, please go ahead.
So, Larissa, sorry to bother you again. It's in following up on your comments and what I gathered from your presentation and the later answers. I see that as a fellow researcher that's trying to do critical theory, because of my particular quote unquote brand of critical theory is very negatively, I was compelled by my supervisor, where's the emancipation? Where's the path? And this is something that was later called a crisis in critical theory. It was a deficit of phenomenological space. It was becoming too normative. It was becoming too a bit stale. And the debate on whether we should gather this phenomenological insight, it's what brings us to a critical theory of Amy Allen and Rahel Yegi, and this later fourth iteration of the school. So my question to you is that, are you currently addressing or thinking about what is your path to, what is the call to action to your dissertation? What is the path to emancipation, right? Because the normative side, we can see that you're already have a pretty good structure or a pretty good cartography. And what is the call to action? What do you think it could be?
Yeah, that's a question I dreaded. But I think the call to action will really depend on how I find AI needs to be conceptualized. So how, given sustainability demands legitimate purposes of sustainability, how do we talk about AI? And how do we address problems related to AI? And then from there, I think sort of then I would say my dissertation would lay the groundwork there, and then it would be a separate project to figure out where to go from here, right? But I absolutely agree that I cannot just leave it at that. So in the end, I will have to have some call to action, and I hope what the contribution could be is defining very clearly what the research questions are for actually turning this into an actionable framework, if that makes sense. But I hear you. I hear you.
Thank you, Larissa. Nicholas is back. Okay, Nicholas, go ahead.
Larissa, let me make you a podcast question. Like, if you had, like, for example, like if at some point in your career you find yourself in a position that, like, for example, like you're a consultant or or an important advisor, like, I don't know, the UE or something like this, and you can actually take implementational measures to help improve the sustainability state of AI or technology in general, or the world maybe, what do you think it would be like? Oh, I would focus my efforts on trying to solve, like, there's a bunch of areas that we could try to attack, but I would like to know what are, in your opinion, the areas who are more in dire need of attention? Like, is it the conditions of mining workers or maybe some other thing? And besides telling me like, what is this vector of attack that you would choose, do you have any idea of like something that could like actually like a change that could be made to dampen the side effects of like this fast moving accelerated society that is like consuming Mother Earth to build chips?
Right. Very difficult question. I think what I would like to see is discussions of proportionality. So somehow implementing in a regulation, and I guess then that has to be a national or international regulation, some sort of measure for which algorithms are worthwhile, whatever that means, and which ones are just not sustainable, and therefore we shouldn't do it. So this is very much, again, a very high level approach. When it comes to concrete measures, I have a really, I don't think I can rank any of these problems. Like I wouldn't even know how to start comparing the plight of workers in the mines to people affected by click work, or the broader challenges that arise with power structures between different countries and development. And yeah, I don't think I can answer that question.
I'm sorry, I made the question.
No, it's all good. It's very challenging, and I should think about it.
Don't hit me, please.
Okay, folks, would you like, anyone else would like to ask a question or offer a comment here to Larissa? Well, let me ask another question then. Very much interested in the way you mentioned both these ethics of desirability following your proposal of an ethics of carefulness, right? Because in both approaches to AI sustainability, or the sustainability vis-a-vis AI systems and technologies, we have the question of sustainable human life in the planet, right? Or sustainable human life on Earth, especially when we finally recognize that we do need this kind of a terrestrial approach to the question of sustainability, because this is the only home we have. This is planet Earth, right? And even though some people who are, contemplating an infinite gamut of possibilities with AI technologies to go beyond our own solar system and galaxy towards other planets and places in the universe, this is still science fiction now. And of course, there is no guarantee that even if we think of a singularity and going beyond human existence, that whatever is left for AI to develop by itself on different planets and galaxies, that this would be successful. I mean, in terms of bringing back life itself, to have organic life or some kind of a life in other galaxies. So this is very speculative, right? So it seems to be more down to earth, more realistic to talk about human life on Earth and how human life is made sustainable by taking into account other life forms, starting with ecosystems with non-human animals, plants, etc. So we think of a biological life, as you know, of life on Earth. Now, even if we are going to try to avoid metaphysical speculations, I really found interesting that you brought together both the idea of carefulness and desirability, because of course this seems to be something that could be shared by humans overall. The idea of self-preservation, even if you think of modern philosophers like Hobbes, Spinoza, going all the way through Nietzsche, German idealism, and phenomenology, we all have in common the idea that there is something like a human desire of self-preservation and the necessity of humans taking care of their own existence. Now, do you feel that this would be problematic nowadays to have something like an anthropocentric approach to sustainability, or anything that would be all right, like Peter Singer's criticisms of speciesism and this kind of stuff, that we are always thinking of humans in the center of the universe. Do you have any problems with this? Would that bother, or is there a different way of talking about carefulness and desirability without necessarily being committed to something anthropocentric? Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, this anthropocentrism criticism, and this, especially with this neo-Heideggerian approach, there comes this idea of this metaphysical approach of human life and what human life is supposed to be like, and so on and so forth. I think there's space for that in both an ethics of carefulness, actually, and an ethics of desirability, specifically with the ethics of desirability, because basically what you're doing is you look at all the different development paths, and here I mean paths of the system, and I mean the socio-eco-economic system, the entire global terrestrial system. Perhaps you should also look at subsystems, and there will be different assessments at different levels. And you look at what's possible, right? And then you pick out the desirable path. So if we are able to conceptualize sustainability and sustainability demands in a less anthropocentric way, then there's also space for picking out development paths where we, for example, stop factory farming completely. So where animal rights are respected, or where we leave certain wilderness areas, right? And this could be part of what we deem desirable. And I think this can actually be achieved from different angles there. So you can just say, from an environmental ethics perspective, there's just worth to nature, and there's worth to other species and plants and animals. You can take the Peter Singer approach. But then you can also take the approach of sustainability as also being about humans and human needs, but human needs being intricately linked to our planetary existence. And this is an idea that you find, for example, in this buen vivir concept that you find in some South American cultures, right? Where a good human life is always lived in relationship and in harmony with the environment around the human life. And you can extend that to the global context. But there's also this one sustainability iteration. Where do I have it? By Sorry, I think I lost you.
All right, still here.
Sorry. When did you lose me?
Well, I got towards,
Communitarian.
yeah.
Communitarian. Yeah. So basically, let me just wrap it up. So the idea is that you can take into account other species and the environment as an end in itself from either this environmental perspective, and you can declare this the desirable development path, right? You can say this is what we want, but in the end, you can also do it from an anthropocentric perspective and still arrive. You can still say from our anthropocentric needs of needing the environment, being this planetary creature, right? We need to take care of the beings on this planet. You can still arrive at a perspective that takes into account the needs of the environment, of ecosystems, of other species, and so on. So there's different routes that you can take, and I think it's definitely not excluded from the concept of either an ethics of desirability or an ethics of carefulness. It depends on how you cash out sustainability, and this is what I'm trying to figure out.
Excellent. By all means, yeah, that's very much very interesting holistic approach. And I always think that this is somehow the way Heideggerian criticisms of technological approaches to metaphysics and stuff like that was all about. So it makes a lot of sense. I really tend to agree with you, and I appreciate your response. Please, Jamie William, go ahead.
Sorry again. Just to be, I think I probably know the answer, but just to be, I think you could talk a little bit about this, but do you see a path for sustainability that does not accompany a critique of capitalism modes of life, of forms of life? Do you see a path for sustainable AI, sustainable life, that still stems from capitalist modes of reproduction? Is that a possibility, or should we grow from the old to the new? That's something different, like the old man Hegel said.
So in part, of course, this is an empirical question. I can't really speak on that. But what is very clear is that current modes of creating value do not work for us, right? So we're in this mess because of the acceleration of our modes of production. And there's this idea of the extractivist logic of capitalism, where everything has to be turned into surplus value. Therefore, you need to extract more and more and more, which is also why you see these post-colonial approaches, right, where you go to the colonies, countries where you can easily just extract and then leave the mess behind, right, and not care about it, and not really give back the value that was actually extracted because you want to keep it as profit for yourself. So there is something to say about that, and I think I will have to say something about these extractivist logics, and I think they are ingrained in capitalism, and it's very certain that cannot continue in this way. Then there's different models, right? You have these degrowth and A-growth models that try to revise a still capitalist system, right? Or well, I guess degrowth and A-growth are not the capitalists anymore. Sorry, I misspoke. But then there's these cycle. What are they called? Circular economies, who still try to work within the capitalist system and say this is how we can make the system work. I'm not an economist. I don't know. I'm skeptical. Let's say it like that. Very skeptical. Something needs to change.
Nicholas?
Larissa, you mentioned briefly like a little bit of Southern America way of viewing philosophy or sustainability. I know a colleague of mine who is working at PUCRS University. His name is Marcos, and he does some decolonial sustainability research. And he has this whole critique of like how you cannot talk about sustainability under a mode of production like capitalism. This is his whole thesis. And to validate his point, he uses indigenous philosophers from Brazil. And I was wondering if you ever thought about aggregating some indigenous perspectives in your sustainability analysis, because if you see like indigenous philosophers from South America or from Africa, they have like the theme of sustainability and the preservation of nature is really embedded into the way they write, which is really different. Have you ever thought about incorporating this into your research or something like this, like just like a different perspective from critical theory? Because I know these people, they also like critical theory, so I think there is some resonance there.
No, absolutely. So far, unfortunately, I haven't gotten into it yet, but I do plan on working on this idea of the extractivist logics. And then, of course, I want to hear also from other perspectives of viewing, well, of conceptualizing modes of production and also of viewing nature and the environment. So no, I have not looked into it yet, but I'm very interested. So maybe you could tell me the name or something so I can look it up. Or maybe if there's someone I could talk to, that would be amazing.
Yes, I can recommend you that.
That would be great.
As someone who knows much more than me about this, like I can.
That's amazing. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, because then I could get into it. Because I think it's really, really important, because right now you have this one narrative and it gets, it's really hard to see any alternatives to it, right? That's the entire story of capitalism, right? Well, this is a bad system, but there's nothing else we can do.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would really appreciate it.
For sure.
Another provocation for you, Larissa. Thank you so much for putting up with us, because we are bringing so many questions to you. Now,
thank you. It's amazing. I love that I'm being challenged. I really need that. I'm very much at the beginning of my project, so the more I get challenged, the better for me, the better my project is going to be. So please send me emails if you have more questions.
Okay. Now, one last provocation, if you will. Now, there are some people talking about, going back to pre-modern approaches to modern technologies, in industrial revolution, etc. Very much reminiscent of Luddites or Luddites in the 19th century. And these people who were thinking that we should get rid of machines and all these industrial revolutionary artifacts. Now, do you think this is even to be considered as a real alternative to these failures of both capitalist and socialist approaches to technological domination, when you keep in mind that even at Heidegger's time, he brought the two of them together. Of course, he had his own mistaken or misleading secret agenda for National Socialism in the 30s, but he was right about the fact that both, let's say, Western capitalist approaches to technology and Soviet-led communist approaches to technology, they were a real disaster. Both were very destructive in terms of the environment and of believing in some kind of liberation through technology. It's amazing to see that both socialist and capitalist modes of production were very destructive. So what is the alternative in terms of, avoiding both, let's say, forms of technological domination? So how, again, this was exactly what you were trying to do with your talk all this time, right? You offered so many things, but what do you have to say to lots of people that today, they go vegan or vegetarian, they try to resort to local agriculture and stuff like that. Some people even think that, the good thing to do is to go to a community, in California, in Black Forest in Germany or in Brazil. Some people go to the countryside. And of course, we still are, we have to deal with the fact that we have such an overall development of technological structures that this is sort of non-realistic. But how do you think we could combine this kind of, alternative ways of life with the fact that we have such a tremendous technological development?
Right. Again, very difficult question. I think, well, first of all, commenting on these very, again, individualistic approaches to how to live a good life in the context, in our context, right? Just retreating to what we knew. Well, the world is not like it was 100 years ago. So these old models will have to, well, they won't work just as they did before. They might have to be adjusted. I'm very skeptical of that working. Also, this, I mean, I'm a vegetarian myself, so I get the appeal of trying to solve things on your own, but what we need in the end are systematic approaches to that. Well, so the thing is where you have to start in order to even find or to even start on finding a solution to all of these problems is realizing that there is this technological paradigm that very much structures how things are run on a very, very fundamental but all-encompassing basis, right? So, for example, there's a point one of my colleagues likes to make, Thijs van de Meulenbrücke, who says that you had the problem with the DDR, for example, the socialist side of the Soviet Union side of Germany back then, where you had factories that were still run according to the technological paradigm and capitalist structures, right? So you still had factories that needed to be organized with machines that only allow for menial workers and then someone at the top who's going to coordinate, because that's just how a factory is run. That's how it's done. So what we need to figure out is how can we design our industry and how can we design our technology in order to account for and to allow for different kinds of social organization. So in the end, you had this problem that in the DDR, for example, you have workers who are de-skilled because they're only trained to work on a very, very specific part of the machinery. They don't know how to make the shoe, right, from beginning to end. And that keeps their perspective very narrow. They don't have an overview of the entire mode of production. And this also makes them very easily governable. And then, of course, people will exploit it, right? So then again, we can't go back to people, to individual shoemakers, right? Because this is just not how we can do it today. So we have to find some way of designing a technology in a way that will facilitate the social structures that we want. And that did not happen, for example, in the Soviet Union. So again, seeing this, the bigger picture of how technology is always social and political, and how there's always this feedback, right? So to start finding solutions, you first have to analyze what these structures are and what the technological paradigm actually is, fill that with a little bit more content. I think I've referred to it very loosely here, and you get the idea, but I think there's much more to be said about it, and I don't really yet know what to say about it. Yeah, so I think that would be my answer. Not very satisfying yet, but I hope at the end of my project, maybe more so.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your answer. Please, William.
It's the last thing, I swear. It's just yeah, because we talked about time, we talked about acceleration, and we're talking about technological advancements. I would be remiss if I don't touch. And if you, I'm sure you know, Harmut Rosa's work on acceleration and resonance.
I actually do not.
You do not know? So
no, I still.
So Harmut Rosa has these two books, Acceleration and Resonance. And Acceleration, he sets the stage for a sociology that is marked by this imperative of acceleration. And in Resonance, he tries to build his critical theory based on a resonant relationship to the world. So, and his whole, it's a very comprehensive, all-encompassing, and it branches on cultural imperatives of growth, sociological, political, and how this different, when we are dealing with a society with different time frames, our personal time is very quick, it's very instant now currently, and democracy's time is very slow. And it's so that's dynamic stabilization is his concept when a society is built on this imperative, and he tries to build a critique on it. And it's interesting, his take on a resonant relationship to the world, and a resonant relationship to the nature, and a resonant relationship to institutional society. So I think it should take a look, see if it's interesting to you. I use it in my dissertation, so it was, for me, it was very, very interesting. So it's,
yeah, thank you for that tip. That immediately makes me think of all these calls for well, the idea of the AI race, right? How everyone wants to be the first, and then all these calls for AI moratoriums to give us a little bit more time to figure out our democratic processes and how as societies we want to answer to that. So I think that could definitely be interesting for me. Yeah, I'll have a look, definitely. Thank you so much.
and just for Nitamar, there is no universal resonance. There is
Well, but that's the problem. I don't think that
There is
Rosa's account is very interesting, but still, we remain without an interesting way of dealing with global structures that bring about, world threats to the environment, sustainability, etc. Because if you think of native indigenous peoples in the Amazon, and Larissa was just asking about the situation in Brazil, I was saying that right now we have lots of discussions in the parliament regarding native indigenous peoples who were living in the Amazon for thousands of years prior to the Portuguese getting to Brazil, or other Europeans, because of course, Germans, French, Dutch, English, and people from different parts of Europe had been to Brazil in the 16th century. But again, it's a different way of perceiving time. Okay, so they have a very slow, very, let's say, sustainable way of relating to nature. But is this a real option that everyone is going to go back to nature in this way? So again, the problem of a universal challenge, starting with Kantian ethics, remains a big issue, because not everyone is a Kantian, not everyone is Hegelian or Heideggerian or whatever. So it's always a big issue for philosophers to think of universal solutions. But even it seems to be even worse when it comes to the social sciences, because I told Professor Rosa when he was here at Porto Alegre, what he would make of Bourdieu's, Pierre Bourdieu's approach to, because his question was very much like that. And let's keep in mind that Bourdieu's doctoral dissertation was on Martin Heidegger's political ontology. And of course, Bourdieu was very challenged by ethnology and anthropology, and this empirical approach to so-called pre-modern peoples of Africa, right? He worked in Algeria, in northern parts of Africa. And it was very interesting the way he wrote about time, because the calendars and things like that, it's enough to travel to Africa or Asia or even to different countries. Probably Larissa had this impression that people, for instance, here, even in Brazil, people say, no, that people in Rio de Janeiro, they have a different perception of time. It's more like California. You go very slowly, you go to the beach, you take, you enjoy more life. If you go to São Paulo, everything is fast and people just think time is money, and you have to work hard and very fast. So even the perception of time can vary from place to place. In the US, they would say the same thing by contrasting California with New York, right? So it's understandable that some people might have a different perception of acceleration. But again, it's an overall, it's a huge, complex problem, and I don't see how you can bring some kind of a universal solution through this critique of acceleration, because other people were trying to do the same thing in sociology. Lipovetsky, as I mentioned the other day, in France, or Baudrillard and other people were making this critique of consumerism, capitalism as a society of consumption. But again, it's very difficult to make people go back, and get rid of their smartphones and all these little gadgets, that are part of daily life for lots of people. But of course, you do not need smartphones, you do not need laptops, and lots of things. You can get rid of them and lead a quiet life, somewhere in the woods. It's always possible for individuals. But I think that, as Larissa pointed out, in terms of governance and structural environmental problems, this is more like an individual choice to adopt as a lifestyle. It will be very complicated. I think it's possible that, for instance, if you think of vegetarianism or even veganism and stuff like that, and you make animal liberation, and let's keep in mind that Peter Singer's book came out in the early 70s, right? Animal liberation was from the very time people were talking about theories of justice, and even the argument that Peter Singer used against the inhuman treatment of non-human animals, and even the meat industry. He was drawing an analogy with racism and sexism. This is very important, right? That his argument is very strong today. And I think it could be universalized somehow. But again, it has this cultural component. If you go to India, non-human animals tend to be more respected in a country like India than most Western countries, because of some cultural values relating to the relationship that people there have with non-human animals. But again, it's very difficult to think in terms of axis of resonance. Okay, Nicholas, you have another question, and Larissa, please feel free to offer your last thoughts and comments to all of us if you want to share with us. But Nicholas, you go ahead.
I would wonder if you ever maybe something that could be interesting for your research too, like when James was citing Hartmut Rosa and in the book that he describes accelerationism, like the little bit that I read of accelerationist theory, that like people usually divide it in like left-wing accelerationism and right-wing accelerationism. Like Mark Fisher is a great example of like the left-wing accelerationism, like criticizing the acceleration. I love him. I love his work. But it's also like there's this other more weird right-wing accelerationist trend when like they actually like their whole argument is that emancipation will come through acceleration. Like the only way that we can escape our current predicament is accelerating to the point that the machine actually breaks and then we can rebuild something. This is a kind of apocalyptic view on accelerationism. Like I think the most easy to attack representative of this line of thought is Nick Land. Nick Land has a really esoteric view on capitalism and accelerationism, but like he defends this idea. We're only going to escape if we actually throttle the machine to the fastest way possible, and then when everything breaks, then we build it again. I think is like it. Have you maybe considered like seeing these debates? Because I think I can, by what you have said thus far, I think I can see in which side of the debate you align more. But like they could be like valid, I don't know, opponents for you to like write against or like do a comeback of ideas on your writings, because they represent maybe the opposite of what you want to do. No, they say, no, let's accelerate to the nth power and then we rebuild it after everything breaks.
Yeah, interesting. The problem is I was completely blindsided by this acceleration debate and I hadn't stumbled across it yet. I think I'll just take that in and take that as some homework to read up on. Okay, I see that Hartmut is not really a critic of acceleration. I see. It sees the value of it. That could be interesting. I mean, it immediately makes me think of like Marxist analyses of how time is actually the unit of value, right? And then maybe how does acceleration change that? That could be interesting. Just a first thought, but a very preliminary thought. Yeah, I don't want to ramble on too long. Just thank you for the comment and this suggestion.
Okay. Once again, thank you very much, Larissa, for this amazing talk and very instigating discussion. We learned a lot, and it was extremely precious and appreciated by everyone here. So we wish you the very best in your undertakings, in your career. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a great learning opportunity for me, especially at the beginning of my project. Thank you for all your comments. I really appreciate it.
All right. Have a nice one, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.